Welcome, lords and ladies, to another episode of Lords Mobile's Beginner's Guide. I am your host, Aevatrex, and today we're going to be talking about a very important thing in Lords Mobile, and that is troops. Now, troops are very important because without them, you wouldn't be able to defend, you wouldn't be able to attack, you wouldn't be able to gather, to help other teammates, etc. So they're a very essential part of Lords Mobile, and it starts right at the beginning. When you make a new account, you can go ahead and start making tier 1 troops, and then it only goes up from there all the way up to currently tier 5. Now, it's going to be important to go over all the details that you need to know regarding troops, how to train them, which ones to train, how to use them, etc. Because the more you know regarding troops and how to defend them and how to properly use them, the better the outcome is going to be for you. Now, let's go ahead and get started really with the barracks, because this is where it all begins. Now, if you click on this triangle right over here, you're going to get a breakdown of how these troops actually interact with each other. So you have infantry, which is the shield icon, showing you that it counters ranged. Now, range counters the cavalry, and cavalry counters the infantry, and then you just start all over. And all three of those counters the siege, and then the siege counters walls, like in the castle and whatnot. So that's kind of like the triangle, or the rock paper scissors, if you will, of how the troops interact. So as long as you have that down, infantry beats ranged, range beats cavalry, cavalry beats infantry, rinse and repeat, you're gonna do just fine. Now, with the tier 1 troops, when you go ahead and start the game, you're gonna be able to start making tier 1 troops, and they're gonna be essential for you to go ahead and start the first couple of challenges and beat the levels and unlock some more buildings for your castle. But as you go on, there is quite a few researches that I want to go ahead and focus on, because they are going to be essential. Now, if you go over to your academy and go over to military, this is the tree that you want to focus on at the beginning when you're starting, because first of all, you're going to unlock the tier 2 troops, which are right here. And as you keep going further down, you will also get the tier 3 troops, which are right here. And once you get a little bit more further down, you're going to unlock the T4 troops, which are super important, and they are right here. So as you keep progressing, as you get more researches done, the tier of troops that you're going to be able to unlock is going to get higher, and usually you want to train the highest tier that you have, with one exception, and that is with tier 3. Now, here's generally what you want to do. When you first start off, train tier 1s up until you unlock tier 2s. Now, tier 2 is the troop that you're going to be able to keep throughout the game, from the beginning all the way up to end game, because tier troops are very important, and we'll get into that in just a bit. Now, once you unlock T3 and it's your highest tier troop that you can get, I would recommend training some, but don't overdo it, because tier 3 is actually going to get dropped, or it should get dropped as soon as you unlock T4. Now, the reason why you want to go ahead and do that is because tier 3 adds a lot of might compared to their strength. So it's usually not really good to keep much T3 on your comps once you actually unlock tier 4. So try to keep a high count of T2 and a decent amount of T3 troops, and then once you unlock T4, just use the T3 until you have no more, and then don't retrain them. What you want to train is T4 and T2 troops. Those are going to be your go-tos. That's going to be your end goal. And then, of course, once you unlock tier 5 troops, that's going to be a completely different ball game, because that then will take the place of your T4, and then maybe you'll split your T4 and your T5 as far as your highest tier troop. But you always want to keep a decent amount of T2, because the reason T2 is really important early and also late is because they're really cheap to train, they're really cheap to heal, and they also take rallies well for you. So it's kind of like the balance between decently good as far as strength, but also don't really take a lot to train and to heal. So it's a perfect balance. Here's a quick tip for you. Currently, I have all infirmaries, which only gives me infirmary capacity, which is okay for me because I'm not really training a lot of troops. But in the event that I want to train quite a bit of troops, what I would choose to do is actually take out my infirmaries and in their place put manners, because manners at level 25 will give you 20% troop training speed. And if you take a look at all the slots that I would be able to put manners here, that means that before you train a lot of troops and you convert over to manners, you will gain over 300% troop training speed just by switching the building. So if you're ever going to be building a lot of troops, make sure that you switch your buildings, because that alone will give you over 300% troop training speed. Now, as you are training your troops from tier 1 all the way up to tier 5, remember there are some researches that you must do for tier 5, and that's going to be in the gear tree. You got to finish this whole tree all the way down to unlock the T5 troops, but of course it is the highest tier right now, so that's going to be for way later down the line. But in between then, there's a couple of things that I would recommend you start working on. First of all, Upgrade Military is an amazing tree for training, not only because it has subsidies which will make the cost of training them much less, but also it has a lot of extra things that'll make it really nice for you. The one being right here, training speed. The more training speed that you can get, whether it's from research, gear, heroes, etc., it's going to be better, because that means you're going to be able to train them faster. You have Barracks expansion, which means that you're going to be able to train more at a time. So this tree right here is just really, really good altogether. Not only that, it's got bigger army, which means that it's going to give you more armies that can march out of your castle, whether that's gathering, sending a rally out, etc. So very, very important tree overall to make sure that your troops are good. And then you have the army leadership, which is another important one, because when you first start your game, you start in an infantry phalanx, which is this one right here. This is how you're going to be by default. Now that's a bad thing, because everybody's going to know how to hit you, and that is what beats infantry? Of course, cavalry. So in order to make sure that that does not happen, what you want to go ahead and do is go over to your academy and go to army leadership and unlock cavalry phalanx and range phalanx, because that's going to help you take hits or even help you attack in the near future. The reason you do that is, remember, there's a rock, paper, scissors aspect to this. So if you're being hit with a cavalry rally and you're only able to do infantry phalanx, well, the cavalry is going to destroy your infantry front line. But if you unlock this, you're able to go ahead and counter that with the range phalanx. So it's a very important early upgrade. And then as you keep going down the line here, you're also going to be unlocking the wedges, which work in different ways, but also very, very beneficial. But essentially what you want to go ahead and do is try to take this, the strength and weaknesses of your troops, and try to maximize it, whether it's changing your formation or whether it's training more of one specific type, etc. This is something that you want to make sure that you emphasize, because it's going to be very, very important. Now that we're looking at the troops, right, let's go ahead and actually take a look at the details, because there is actually quite a bit of information here. So if you go to any specific troop type, you'll see what it counters, and you can actually click on it and it'll give you the information and what it's countered by. So always keep that in mind, and especially if you forget, this is a good way to actually take a look at it. Now the next bit of information is the might, and that is going to be how much might you gain per one troop. So like I mentioned, T3 is 24 might, whereas T2 is only 8 might, and T3 is not 3 times stronger than T2, so that's why the might here, and you'd want to go ahead and lean more towards the T2. But as you get towards the T4 and T5, these are the strongest troops in the games, so also keep a lookout into that. Another thing you want to keep a lookout on is the upkeep. Now the upkeep is the amount of food that it's going to be, quote unquote, eating every second, and the more troops you have, the more upkeep you're going to have. And so if you have a lot of troops and you don't have the amount of food production, it's going to actually go in the negative, and it's going to go ahead and burn your food. Now the one good positive towards that is that even if your food is at 0, your troops will not go away or disappear or anything like that. You are just going to need to use foods from your bags on your items like this in order to actually use, whether it is training other troops or anything that has to deal with food. You're gonna have to draw that from your bags because you're gonna constantly stay at 0. So something to keep in mind. But the last thing I also want to go ahead and point out is the capacity. Now the capacity, what this means is how much resources one troop can actually hold. Now the destroyers or the siege are going to be the best one for that, but also keep in mind that the walk speed, as you can tell, the speed down here is basically 0. So while they can hold the most, they move the slowest. So what a lot of people do is sometimes they'll send the cavalry, whether it's T1 or whatever tier you want to send, because the capacity is not as good, but it's decent, and the speed is really good. Whereas you have the cannoneers, which capacity is okay, but the speed is kind of slow once again. And then of course infantry capacity is a little bit better, but the speed is slower. So generally speaking, the slower they are, the more capacity they'll have, but it's kind of like a min-max. Do you want to get there faster, or do you want to get the resources faster? That's really up to you. Now there's many ways that you can boost your troop training, and that is going to be through, first of all, let's talk about the gear, because there's really not that many items that will boost the your troop training speed, and I'm gonna go ahead and show you the only items that there are for that. So the course helm, it's got a training speed of 7% at mythic. You also have the craggy greaves, which gives you a training speed of 14%. And then you have the offhands for the champion items, which is, I guess, take your pick. And you can go ahead and get 14% training speed from that. Now there are heroes that also give you some troop training speed. Most notably the Watcher, as you can get this one through just doing some held events. And this one has training speed plus 20%. Now there are quite a few heroes that will come with training speed. Now there are other heroes that will give you that same training speed. Another notable one is going to be the Dream Witch. That'll give you the same 20% at gold. And you have others like Witch Doll, etc. So just take a look at the heroes that you're training up, that you're taking up, and see if it's giving you that training boost, because it goes a very long way. So let's say you're training troops, you're getting to a decent number, etc. The next step is knowing how to protect your troops, because that's going to be super important. Well, the game gives you quite a few different ways to deal with that. First of all, you have a shield, which will protect you from getting attacked from anybody. And let's say you don't have a shield to use, you also have this right here, the shelter. Gives you an option for going 1 hour, 4 hours, 8 hours, and 12 hours. So if for some reason you can't have a shield or don't have a shield to use, you can go ahead and do this for 12-hour protection. And depending on the amount of heroes and troops that you have, it'll give you an amount that you can actually use. Remember also this. Right now you see here that I'm only protecting 305,000. Like I mentioned, your number might be different. But if you actually use a max army size boost if needed, you can actually go ahead and save more of your troops here. If it comes to that, if you're being attacked and you need to save more of your troops, etc., just remember that your max army size will help you actually shelter more troops. And the other way, let's say that sheltering doesn't allow you to hide all of your troops, right? Let's say you shelter 457,000 or whatever your number may be at the moment, but you still have some troops out. Well, the other way that you can go about this is you can actually pick a teammate like this, and you can reinforce, and that'll allow you to send troops out, whether it's 300,000 or whatever number it may be. And you can do that as many times as the armies that you can have out. So whether it's 5 armies that you can have out, or whether it's the maximum of 8, you can just go ahead and fight different teammates, especially if you're in a hive, and start sending them your troops. So if you're ever in a pinch where you gotta hide all of your troops, you're being rallied, etc., that's a good way to do it. Shelter your troops and start reinforcing teammates, all of your troops. That way you don't actually take many losses. One word of caution though is that if you ever do send troops to your teammate, make sure that they do know, because if for some reason they port away, your troops will be returned. So very important to also keep that in mind. Another thing that you can do is you can actually go ahead and rally a darkness for whether it's 5 minutes or however long, 8 hours. You can go ahead and set a fake rally on a darkness, and what that's going to do is that rally is going to be away from the attack. So there's a lot of different ways that you can actually go ahead and protect your troops. It just comes down to how many troops you have and what you need to do at the moment in order to make sure that you don't lose all of your troops. But remember, worst comes to worst and you do get hit, you do lose some troops. Hopefully you do have some infirmaries that will help you with that, and you also will have the sanctuary, so in case you do lose some troops, you'll generally be getting some back. So just make sure that you try to minimize the amount of damage that you can actually receive. Well, that'll be it for this week's episode. Next week, we're going to be touching on buildings and the importance of buildings and different ways you can set your buildings to maximize what it is you want to do with your castle. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But yeah, appreciate you guys for coming through, and until later.